Welcome to the DG Breakdown Podcast. This is Sikdar with Chris Taylor, and every week we're bringing you something about Dragon Gym. This week we're continuing with our discussion about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and self-defense. If you missed it, check out our last couple episodes. We discussed whether or not Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was a good style of martial arts to learn self-defense. Then in another episode, we discussed ways and strategies and mindset tips on getting started with a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu course, whether you have no martial arts experience at all, or if you are an experienced martial artist in, let's say, a striking style like Muay Thai, Karate, or Taekwondo. Today, we're going to continue on our discussion with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and talk about supplemental training and activities. So what do we mean by that? Is things like stretching, strength training, weightlifting, cardiovascular conditioning, and nutrition. And of course, probably the most important thing is recovery. So Chris and I here both have been training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well as other martial arts for a long time. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu specifically for about 10 years. Chris, I think maybe even a little longer for you. And we've also been into, nutritional experimentation, supplementation, and various different modalities of strength training and conditioning. So we're going to talk about our experience, what we've come up with as, what we consider today to be the best approaches, and also, our opinions on that different approaches may actually be better for different people. Keep in mind, we are going to talk about some nutrition strategies, but we cannot give you an exact nutrition plan. You need to speak with either a doctor or a registered nutritionist, dietitian type of person if you want a specific dietary plan for yourself. We're just talking about strategies and things that work well for us. So, Chris, I'll hand it over to you. I know we had some questions come in since last week. So let's get started there, and then we can talk about some other things.
All right, so hey, everybody. The questions have come in from Matt Grulke, and he writes, "Hi, Chris. Regarding nutrition, I am currently eating a small meal, around 300 calories at 4:30 p.m. before training in TKD at 6:30 and BJJ at 7:30. If I eat too close to class, I feel sick, and if I don't eat at all, I feel sick. So I guess this is working for me. However, my two questions are, what should I eat that is substantial enough to carry me until 9 p.m. when I get home, after 9 p.m. when I get home, and good for training regarding energy, health, and recovery? And number two, when I get home after 9 p.m., is it okay to just have a protein shake as a supplement if I already ate a light meal at 4:30? He has a couple follow-up questions, but let's address those two first. I would say, and this is hard because, Sam, this is our life. When are we home before 4:30 or before 5 on a regular basis? Hardly ever.
Sunday,
yeah, exactly. Saturday too for me, but generally throughout the week, the peak of our day is, around the same time. So I'm usually not getting home from class until anywhere between 9 and 11, depending on what I'm doing afterwards. So it's next to impossible for me to not eat from 3 p.m. until 11 p.m. It's too long of a window. I try to eat, I found what works for me. I eat as much food as I can at that time, but I don't feel heavy and lag down, which is actually not that much food. So we're talking like a sandwich maybe, or a larger salad, and then some coffee. And then I'll have to eat something afterwards. I know that's not the best approach. And there's a lot of things kind of coming out now referring to diets revolving around circadian rhythm and all, time restricted eating and all that stuff. And it flies right in the face of all that. And I tried that for a little while, and I like the concept, but I really don't know how to make it work for me. If I eat a meal, like, Matt was saying here, is like, if I eat a meal before peak exercise activities, I'm sluggish, and I start getting tired and slow, so I have to eat something.
Yeah, I think the other part of this is the answer is always it depends. And, these are really good questions. but everybody kind of reacts a little bit differently. And the next question, I don't know if he has it in a later question, but how what you're eating and when to eat and what to eat, it can also be determined with how you are recovering or not recovering from training, and how you're sleeping or not sleeping after training. And it really, um, all of those factors, we really have to look at a big picture of what's going to work for you. And you just need to be responsive to changes. When things start to seem out of normal, that's a good reason to start making changes in what you're doing. And the only way to really know that for sure is to collect data and log what you're eating, when you're training, how much you're training, how much you're sleeping, the quality of the sleep. So both quantitative and qualitative logging of information can be very helpful. And then you can go back and look in your journal and be like, okay, this was working well for me and this wasn't. So you mentioned something about the like circadian rhythms. So I just got some new information that we'll have to talk about later because I haven't done the research yet about your liver. So apparently your liver essentially like changes phases twice a day, once in the morning and once at night. So every 12 hours. So there may be some like physiological basis to what people call like biorhythms or circadian rhythms. So I'm going to do some more research for you guys on that, and see what I find out. So anyway, back to eating. So me personally, I have used many strategies, one of which was a intermittent fasting strategy, which for a long time worked very well for me. So the basic setup of this intermittent fasting strategy was often called the 16-8 protocol. So what I would do is fast for 16 hours a day. So that basically means no food intake, but definitely water, tea, coffee was allowed. So the timing of it worked like this. I would typically finish my last meal around 10 p.m. and would not have my first meal until 2 p.m. the next day, right? So when I was doing this protocol, I was working out generally 2 times per day, right? One around lunchtime, 1 o'clock was my strength training workout. So fasted workout, train, things like kettlebells or deadlifting, bench press, strength training, resistance training. Depending on the time of year, maybe it was all body weight training like muscle ups and, uh, you know, planches and front lever, like that type of gymnastic type of training. But fundamentally, strength training where you're working against resistance and not cardiovascular training, right? Not this like steady state hitting the treadmill and running for a given period of time. So work out, then eat around 2 o'clock, then midday have another. So midday, 2 o'clock is midday.
Our midday.
Our midday is like 4 or 5 p.m. Have a light meal that might have been a salad or a shake. And then the evening sessions would be teaching and then training. Then go home between 9 and 10, have a full meal. And that full meal at the end of the day for me was very large, probably 1,000 calorie meal, maybe more, depending on what I was able to eat or wasn't able to eat early in the day. And that worked really well for me for years, years and years and years. But a couple of things changed in the environment, right? One, less sleep, less sleep. Uh, you know, for those of you with young kids, you get it, right? And that's just a fact of life. So it may be you have young kids and you no longer get to have that straight, uninterrupted 6 to 8 hours of sleep. Maybe it's just a change in your work schedule when you have to wake up. So I found that because of that change in sleep, being fasted from, one, having a limited amount of sleep at night, and two, waking up earlier, right, and going without any caloric intake until 2 p.m., I just didn't have the energy on a low sleep level and a low caloric level to work out effectively. So I gave up on the fasted workouts and started having breakfast. So this is what I'm doing now. And this is also working well for me. Okay. I'll have breakfast, the standard breakfast of what will standard for me. Right. So what I eat for breakfast is typically 2 to 4 eggs, cottage cheese, and some sort of flaxseed preparation. Right. So I've been experimenting with no carb flaxseed bread, which it gets the job done, folks, but I will not share the recipe because I don't have any. You're not my enemies. So it does not taste good. It does not taste good. It's not the most pleasant thing to eat. But flaxseed is something I would encourage everyone because it's high in omegas and it's high in fiber. So the fiber, keeps things moving. The omegas threes omegas are good generally for keeping inflammation down in the body. So that's going to help with recovery as well. Okay, so that's breakfast, typically happening pretty early in the morning. Then I will have a light lunch. So the lunch will either be a salad with no meat or protein on it. So like no eggs, no chicken, anything. So essentially just, a bowl of lettuce and a protein shake, or just the protein shake if I don't have time to get out and get a salad. So I'm still getting protein midday, but it's not heavy like eating 4 to 6 eggs or a chicken breast, or if you guys eat meat, a steak or something like that. It's not heavy.
Yeah.
So that's somewhere between 12 p.m. and 2 p.m. And then again at between 4 and 5 p.m. I'll have another shake. So a light protein shake, typically a whey protein. So that second shake is what gets me through the evening training session.
What time do you have that shake?
Between 4 and 5 p.m. Right. So then, there's a little bit of calories, there's a little bit of protein there. That's, for me, I'm good. Then I can, teach a class or two and then train. I don't feel sluggish, don't feel tired. And then, okay, we're back to 8:30, 9 o'clock, full meal, and then back to sleep. So, as for Matt, our original question asker, I would, suggest maybe experimenting with this idea is have lunch and then have another shake later in the evening, 4 to 5 p.m. Get in your training, and then have a bigger meal at night. Don't restrict yourself to just a shake.
Yeah. I mean, especially if you're hungry. There are times, and I don't know, maybe it's just me, maybe it's everybody else, but after training, whether I've eaten or not, sometimes I just don't feel like eating at all. And I'll just come home, and I really should be hungry, and I'll just eat a shake and go to bed.
Yeah.
So like if you feel like eating, you probably should. And if that's at least
don't,
the measure
don't
I go
force
with.
yourself to eat. There's just like there is some benefit to consuming, of course, good food, but nutrition after training. So after training, your liver is operating after intense physical exercise. Your liver is operating in slightly a different way than it is at rest. Without getting like too technical, but basically, if you consume calories, food after training, within that 30 to 90-minute window, your muscles, you have better what we call glycogen uptake, right? So you will have a better chance of that nutrition getting into your muscles, which then aids in muscle recovery. So whether you're doing resistance training, like fast twitch type training like taekwondo, or I don't know if I would call jiu-jitsu necessarily slow twitch training, but it is similar to resistance training where you're using a lot of muscular tension and a lot of muscular endurance is required. So muscular recovery is going to be important. And for that reason, I would recommend, getting some nutrition in after training.
So that's kind of where I've gotten the rule that you always want to have your protein within 30 minutes of your workout, right?
Yes.
So what about protein? I guess is it better to have protein before workout and then after workout, or one or the other, or how would you structure that?
I would recommend both.
Okay.
I would recommend both. So again, like if well, it doesn't necessarily have to be protein before your workout, but for general purposes, what most of us should be following without getting too complicated is a higher protein, high-ish fat, low-ish carb kind of thing. So, um, you know, 40 to 50% of your calories are coming from fat.
Mhm.
Maybe 25 to 30% are coming from protein, and then, 20% or less of your calories are coming from carbohydrates. So, the fat and protein is going to be one used as fuel for training, and then the protein and whatever other nutrition carbohydrates that you're getting after training is going to be used for rebuilding or recovery after training.
So Matt has a couple other questions. Question number one, is there a recommendation for taking days off for recovery, or is it better to just cross train? And then question number two, during training, it is difficult to find the line between pushing yourself and injury. Is there any guidance on this?
So, first the recovery day type of thing for people. So Matt, you've been training with us for a long time, so you're in a little bit of a different scenario. But for people starting out, whether it's in strength training, jujitsu, or any other martial art, we really recommend starting out with 2 to 3 days per week and training essentially every other day. So you're giving yourself a full recovery day in the beginning. And essentially what that means is your body adapts to the stress that you put on it. So when you're starting out with martial arts, you have not yet adapted to the demands of martial arts training, the flexibility demands, the speed demands, the cardiovascular demands, the strength endurance demands. So it's going to be highly taxing and stressful on your body. And although stress is a good thing because it can stimulate change and growth, too much of it is a bad thing. It will be counterproductive for your progress. So in the beginning, 2 to 3 days per week, you rest every other, just full on rest every other day. Now, as you advance and get deeper into the training and you're interested and you get a lot of not just physiological but psychological benefit from training, we have people, they train 5-6 days a week, and they operate like that in perpetuity. One, because your body has adapted to the training, so it is less taxing and less stressful on the body. And two, typically people that are training 5 to 6 days a week are not training at the same intensity level every day, right? So, in our program, how often do we do hard, like, sparring?
Not real often. Maybe once or twice a week.
Right.
Like hard sparring.
Exactly, right? Or, that, and this is awesome, it's fun, but you can't do it every day. It's just, turning on the clock and sparring for 10 rounds.
Once every 18 weeks.
Yeah. Right.
1 week every 18 weeks.
Yeah. So you need to get to that, 90, 95, 100% intensity level, because otherwise you won't be able to go there when you need to. But it's not optimal to train there all the time.
Yeah.
So once your body has adapted to martial arts training or the combination of martial arts and strength training, as long as you're smart about varying the intensity somewhere between 40 and 80%, you can probably train in some way every day, right? So that doesn't mean, well, Sam said be at 80%, so I'm going to be at 80% Monday through Saturday. No. What I'm saying is maybe on Monday you're at 40%, on Tuesday you're at 80%, on Wednesday you're at 50%, on Thursday you're at 60%, on Friday you're back to 40, and Saturday is like Saturday's training day, right? And we're back at 80%. Something like that is totally valid. And the way you might modulate that percentage of intensity is changing the nature of the activity, right? So Monday is a high intensity day, it's jujitsu, right? Tuesday is like a medium intensity day. Maybe it's taekwondo. Wednesday's back to jujitsu. Thursday's strength training. Friday is a high intensity day, but it's a sparring day for taekwondo. And then Saturday is another high intensity day. It's back to jujitsu. Sunday is a full on rest day. And look, on rest days, if you want to do a walking, I think is very beneficial on a rest day just to keep the muscles moving. Now, if you're combining strength training and martial arts training, you have to, keep those factors in mind as well.
Yeah. It's hard to kind of do both, on the same day, like strength training and then different martial arts training. I don't know if it's a mental thing or a physical thing, but they just don't seem to mesh well for me. Like I can do jujitsu and then strength train, but I don't like to go strength training and then jujitsu. So that affects my week and that affects how hard.
Yeah. I think so. I think it depends on the martial art. I think it depends on the martial art, and I think it depends on what you're going to be doing. So like if you know that, okay, I have taekwondo class tonight. I know we're not sparring. It's largely like a drilling type of day. We're going to be working on forms and some self-defense techniques. Like strength training beforehand is not going to be a huge deal, right? But if I know it's like a sparring night or like a pad hitting night where it's going to be a lot of speed, a lot of work, a lot of demand, strength training before is going to be counterproductive. Because for me, like strength training looks like doing a bunch of deadlifts, and if your legs are shot, going into taekwondo is not going to be that much fun. And the same is true for jiu-jitsu, at least for me, because I know to a degree, that there's going to be a lot of muscular strength and strength endurance required, right? So if you're hitting the bench press and the the vertical press and doing a bunch of squats, you're just going to be physically tired for martial arts training. And for us, the martial arts is the primary, and the strength training supplements that, right? So if your focus is strength training or bodybuilding and you're using martial arts as your supplemental, let's say a supplemental cardio, then this equation gets flipped. But for us, we want to make sure that we're not too tired or too fatigued for our martial arts training, because that's the focus. So we want to get the most quality out of that training. And that's why, all right, you train in jiu-jitsu, roll for half an hour to 45 minutes, tired, rest a little bit. Then you can go hit the weights, and it doesn't seem like that big of a deal.
Yeah.
But if you flipped it, it's a little counterproductive.
Yeah. So Matt is also asking about how far to push oneself. It depends, personally for me, if it's sparring in jiu-jitsu, the opponent is kind of my factor. Like if it's a wipeout, I'm not going to push myself as hard as I can with a new student. But if it's like my coach or, somebody that I'm used to training with, I'm going to push myself pretty hard. I mean, probably, not to the point of injury, but pretty hard. I don't know what you can take from that, man. But you should be pushing yourself at least once a day or once a week.
And once a week, the math will work out nicely. My rule of thumb is 80% of the time I want to be below 80% intensity. So if you're training 5 days a week, once a week, yeah, you probably want to push yourself past that 80%. Now, there's another, saying that we have, and there's two kinds of pain, right? The pain of injury. So you don't want to hurt yourself, because if you're injured, you won't be able to train in the future. But then there's the pain of effort, right? And you, especially if your focus is on martial arts, and equally so if your focus is on self-defense, right? So martial arts, although it has many benefits, right? Physical fitness, stress reduction, mental clarity, there's some meditative aspects to it, right? But inherently, martial arts is about violence and physical conflict, right? Is every so often you want to see how much conflict you can tolerate, right? And what do I mean by conflict? That's really like what is your tolerance for the pain of effort, and the what is your tolerance for discomfort, right? And that can be done in many ways. It might be sparring somebody that is, more proficient than you are. That might be, doing that extra rep or that extra set if you're strength training. It might be, you know, after 5 rounds of hitting pads is doing that sixth round, or just trying to kick faster, doing that one extra set up and down the mats. Is, when you get to that point where you're mentally tired, you're physically tired, your muscles are aching, and just going a little bit past. I am a firm believer you need to do that, once in a while. Again, not every day, probably less than 20% of how often you train. You need to push yourself to that edge. Uh, because, in part, all of these side effects or benefits of martial arts training stem from being on that edge.
Mm-hmm. I agree. You were talking about the pain of effort versus the pain of injury. From a jujitsu standpoint, like the pain of effort should be effectively disregarded. Like if you're being choked and you're trying to fight that choke, like you're gonna fight as long as you are awake, until unless you can't take it anymore, but you're ignoring the fact that you're being choked and you are thinking about getting out, and if you're pushing or pulling or holding or gripping, like all of that stuff, like you don't think about that stuff. What you push as hard as you can, and you ignore that up until the point of
Well,
experiencing
so
the pain
like,
of injury.
here's a distinction I would make, at least for clarity in my own mind, right? Is if I'm getting armbarred, right, and I refuse to tap because my elbow hurts, and then my elbow pops or gets damaged, that's a pain of injury, and like I should not have pushed it that far, right? But if we're training, like you and I are training, and I'm tired and my grip is failing, and I keep getting caught, but you haven't quite, like, we've trained with people that are advanced than us, and they'll put you in a submission. At least it's happened to me. I don't know if it's happened to you, but like they'll put you in a submission, take the submission to the edge, and then let it go.
Oh,
It's like
yeah.
torture, right?
Yeah.
But that's the pain of effort, right? Because when you're tired, you're mentally beaten, technically beaten by someone. The easiest thing to do is to tap, especially when that person is advanced than you, because then there isn't even ego in play, right? Well, yeah, I just got tapped by a coach. Like, it's gonna happen, right? And that's why sometimes coach will take you to those levels, because you gotta stick through it. Because it's easy to tap, he's not gonna let you tap. And that's what I would say is the difference, at least in my mind, between the pain of effort and the pain of injury. Right? I'm not going to not tap and break my arm, because then I won't be able to train tomorrow.
Right. So Matt, thanks for those great questions. They were well worded and very concise. We had a couple other questions on our closed Facebook group regarding nutrition, what to eat after class. A lot of people were asking that. Michael is asking about. So he's talking. There's a really long thread here, and he, and myself are talking to him about the keto diet and waterboarding. What was it called? Water fasting.
Water fasting, not waterboarding.
So like after you notice that like partway through this thread here, I stopped talking because I don't know what the heck is going on. Like you and he had continued this conversation, so maybe Sam, you want to run with that a little bit because it's way over my head.
Okay, so we were talking in that thread about the ketogenic diet, and what that is where you change your diet in such a way where it is majority fat, right? So 70 to 80% of your caloric intake is from fat, and almost zero carbohydrate intake, and then smallish protein intake. And what happens is your body switches over to burning fat as fuel instead of sugar as fuel, right? And it's very effective. it's it's hard to get there, right? It's hard to get to ketogenesis because even eating too much protein, which people don't really think about, like, oh, as long as I don't eat carbs, even eating too much protein will kick you out of ketogenesis, because if there's the excess of protein, it will actually get converted um, to what looks more like sugar in the bloodstream. So it's a pretty complicated thing. It's effective. I'm disinclined to like lay it out and give advice because it's deep stuff, as you can see with how much research that Mike has done.
Mm-hmm.
But it works well. I have never done a ketogenic diet personally. I've looked into it a lot, but it's not something that I do. Mostly because I like eating.
Yeah.
That's like I like eating not great foods. I shouldn't say not great foods. I eat fairly healthy, but I like eating some of the carbohydrate type of stuff. Right? I'm Indian. I eat lots of rice and curry. That's really what it comes down to.
Well, explain the potatoes then.
um, so if it's something that you're interested in, it can be done. But I would highly recommend either seeking out an expert or doing your own research, more than just the few pointers that you're going to get in a podcast.
Definitely. And then the last question we had was from Kelly, and she was asking about following a plant-based diet. So I guess some form of vegetarianism, whatever measure that might be called. How does that affect your training in jiu-jitsu or martial arts in general?
Um, so there's a vegetarian diet, there's a vegan diet, and then depending on how strict you are with either of those is going to make a difference. So I have been vegetarian for extended periods of time throughout my life and training career, and I did actually not find any um, physical effect on my training. The only effect that I had was like I missed eating meat and fish. Just like psychologically, I missed it.
Mm-hmm.
But physiologically, like I didn't feel any effect. Some of those um, vegetarian phases, I was not even eating eggs,
Mm-hmm.
only dairy, but a lot of dairy. So I was getting protein there and supplementing with whey, which is dairy derivative, and it was fine.
Yeah.
But I was still getting a significant amount of calories, and a significant percentage of my calories were still coming from protein. Add eggs into the mix, it was even better. So now, if you're going to be more, I don't know exactly what all the rules of vegan, but if you're excluding egg proteins and dairy proteins, now it's going to be tough. Uh, to make sure you're getting enough, I think you would have to supplement with something. I think you would have to. Um, the pea proteins seem to be a pretty highly, like a high availability protein, so to speak, that's absorbed well by the body. Rice protein is another option. And then, if your body tolerates them, like nuts and legumes to supplement the rest that way. But, I think the key with following a vegan or vegetarian diet is twofold. One, make sure that you're actually getting enough calories, like you're actually eating enough. And what determines enough is going to be different for everybody. But the nice thing about eating vegetables all day is you can fill up, and it's actually just not a lot of calories.
Yeah.
Right. The downside is you may not have consumed enough protein. You may not have. So supplementing with protein is important, in my opinion.
What's the longest you've ever been vegetarian for?
About 6 months.
Really?
Yeah.
I've heard people, I'm not vegetarian, but I've heard people come off of a vegan lifestyle for an extended amount of time, and they have a lot of complaints about it. I've probably heard more of that than I have heard, people, you know, talking about how awesome vegetarianism is. So it's not really anything that
So
I know much about.
they had difficulty when they started eating meats.
They had difficulty. So I knew two people personally, but they had difficulty initially when they first started eating meat, and then they had difficulty that they later attributed to being vegan for so long. Like they bone issues and I guess arthritis or joint issues.
Mm-hmm.
So they attributed it to being vegan for years and years and years and years. I don't know if that's true. They don't really have any proof either, but it was just.
Yeah, like I don't know if that data exists, right? Have people done longitudinal studies on people that have had a strictly, you know, plant-based diet?
Can't answer that.
Like I don't know of any like cultures or societies that have that. Right? There are, like there's people in American culture that eat a very strict diet. There's people in Indian culture that eat a very strict diet like this, but you know, I don't know that they've been studied over a long period of time or large swaths of the population of whether it's good or bad. If anybody has that research, I'd love to see it.
Mm-hmm. So I think that we've kind of gotten all the nutrition stuff that we can really talk about. Was there anything else that?
I think we should dedicate a full episode to strength training and conditioning.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about supplementation a little bit? Is there any kind of like non-nutrition supplements that have been helping you?
Yeah, I think supplementation is a strange kind of thing because, there's that like, well, why are you taking supplements? You should be able to get everything you need from real food. Maybe, it's one is what's the quality of the food, and the other is like, well, let's do the math on that, right? There's people like, oh, you spend so much money on protein shakes. Well, how much is it going to cost me to get lunch at McDonald's? I don't know. $5, $3, right? And instead of grabbing lunch at McDonald's or wherever, you just have a shake, and your cost per serving on the shake is, if you're buying them in individual servings at retail, $3.50.
Mm-hmm. And that's about as expensive as it gets.
And that's it. So, the math works still to supplement. So supplements that I would recommend are probably, first and foremost, protein supplementation. Second, some sort of multivitamin is always a good idea. And third, some sort of omega supplementation, right? Most of us are not eating enough, just in our regular diets, getting those, what we call essential fatty acids, the omega 3s. So ways to do that are fish oil, eating more fish, like I think sardines are very good, anchovies are very good for omega 3s.
Mm-hmm.
Could be wrong about that. Salmon, stuff like that. Olive oil is okay. So animal-based fats are going to have more of the different types of omega-3s than plant-based are. So there might be some benefit to that. Flaxseed, chia seed, all have omega-3s in it. But, you can buy over-the-counter supplements of omega-3. If you have any, like, fish allergy or something, you can still get plant-based omega-3s. Another thing is, and I think we both use this, is caffeine is a supplement for training. It's not just for, getting your ass out of bed.
Yeah.
Right.
Now we had talked one time about consuming, I forget what it's called, but just the caffeine powder versus consuming caffeine in the form of coffee.
Yeah.
Because there's an ingredient in coffee, or there's a something in coffee that allows your body to process it differently than just straight caffeine.
Correct. So I can't remember what it is right now off the top of my head, but basically drinking coffee because of the other things that are in coffee will slow the burn rate, and you'll have that boost a little bit longer. If you just take straight caffeine, you're going to have a quick and high spike, and what goes up must come down.
Mm-hmm.
You're probably going to crash faster and harder
Mm-hmm.
with if it's just caffeine. Other things that you know we might suggest you look into vitamin D supplementation. Most people that live north of Maryland are probably vitamin D deficient because we don't get enough sunlight. Dark skinned people like myself tend to be more vitamin D deficient. Uh, I'm hypothesizing here, but probably because we're evolved to live in a more a climate or a latitude closer to the equator.
Yeah.
But conversely, uh, light skinned people are now it looks like light skinned people are becoming more and more vitamin D deficient because they use sunscreen.
Right.
So that we're all back together again. So vitamin D is something you should look into. And look, any supplementation, the only way to know for sure if like, are you iron deficient? Are you vitamin D deficient? Are you A? What are all these things? The only way to know for sure is to get blood work done. So see your doctor, see what you're deficient in. But again, things that we use and are helpful for us, zinc, right? Many of us are possibly zinc deficient. So if you're a male and are zinc deficient, you possibly could have low testosterone.
Hmm.
So supplementing zinc might raise your testosterone levels. Now here's a caveat. Super saturating with zinc isn't going to increase your testosterone, right? So if you're zinc deficient, you may be testosterone deficient. If your zinc levels are normal and your T levels are normal, adding zinc isn't going to increase your T levels. If your zinc levels are normal and your T levels are low for some other reason, stress, maybe it's hereditary, who knows, adding zinc isn't going to raise your T levels. But if your T levels are low due to a zinc deficiency, it'll get you back to baseline. Magnesium is nice. Relaxes the body, helps with recovery and sleep. Those are big ones that I use on the regular, and they seem to be helpful.
Yeah, I've been taking cordyceps mushrooms and taurine before class, and that's helped a little bit with endurance.
Mm-hmm.
It feels more like muscular endurance. I'm not sure if it's really cardio endurance.
Yeah.
I haven't experimented with that with weightlifting. I've never really put those together. Usually I take a pre-workout and that's got all kinds of things in there, and I usually kind of trust that. There's creatine in that. So when it comes to creatine, do you take creatine all the time? Like, you read the back of the box that says, or the container says, on lifting days you should take this much. On off days you take this much. So you're basically taking creatine every single day for some amount of time.
There's some mixed thoughts on that, at least from me. So one is this idea of like, okay, if in order for this thing creatine to work, your body needs to be at a saturation level. So in order to maintain a saturation level, you have to take it every day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that makes sense. The other side of me says, well, really, they just tell you that so that you use more product and have to buy it more often.
So have you experimented with one or the other?
If I'm taking creatine, I only take it on workout days. And that seems to work. I haven't taken creatine in over a year.
Really?
Yeah.
I stopped taking it. I lost about 10 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
I was taking it every day. Well, roughly every day.
Yeah.
And I think probably 2 weeks after I really kind of like stopped taking it, 10 pounds just came off, and I think it's just water.
Yeah, it does cause you to retain a little bit of water. It may stress the kidneys, it may not. But for me, it has been effective in the past for adding muscle. Seemed to help.
Yeah.
So I used it. Right now, I'm at a body weight and kind of like desired body mass. I'm not trying to bulk up actually. So I'm not taking creatine.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I think that all the questions that we had on Facebook. Has there been any other questions that people have posed to you individually or personally?
No, no. These are the general. We get the same questions.
Yeah, they were. It
Yeah.
was the same kind of question, probably asked 3 or 4 different ways.
Yeah.
You know, mostly people are fretting about eating too much and what to eat. You know, what do you eat before you train? You know, like let's say you're going to go to a class tomorrow at noon, and you know you're going to work your tail off. What are you going to do to prep for that? How early before that class, and what are you going to do after that class to kind of recover?
I'm like taking jujitsu at noon tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I would probably have breakfast. You know,
What would your breakfast consist of? Eggs?
2 eggs, probably half a cup of cottage cheese, and 2 tablespoons of flaxseed.
Mhm.
Before breakfast, I would have had 1 or 2 cups of green tea, hot green tea. Then breakfast, then no other food, uh, but drinking water the rest of the morning. Just because geography, probably leave around 11:30 to get to class. Train from 12 to 1:30, and then on the drive, either the drive home or back to work, have a protein shake on the drive. Always have it ready to go.
Mhm.
Um, and then shower, then have lunch.
What would you have for lunch?
Something light,
Yeah.
Salad.
And how do you feel in the evening after that regime?
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
I getting ready for a noon class. Like I would have coffee first thing when I wake up. You know, water throughout the morning, and then probably about 10:30, I'll have some yogurt with a couple of tablespoons of chia seed and flaxseed and a little bit of granola. Like that's my thing right now.
Yeah.
And it's got to be a half hour to an hour before class because it sticks with you, but it's not real heavy.
Yeah.
You have a little bit of energy from it. That's it. I'll bring some water with me, and I'll bring my protein shake for after class. And then I've had 2 kind of pathways after class, right? So like for me on Wednesday, I'll train at noon, and then I'll train at 7:30. And at 7:30, I'm wiped out some days. And other days, I feel like $1,000,000. And I cannot seem to pin down what the difference is. And I'm taking the same supplements. I'm eating the same foods. The only thing that seems to be varying right now is what I'm eating for lunch.
Mm.
So initially, I thought, hey, I'll have a nice like salad. So I'd get a salad with the first couple of times I tried it, or was noting it, I would have a little bit of meat or some avocado on it. Then I just tried just a straight salad. And then lately, I just eat whatever I want to eat. Like today, I had a chicken parm. I feel like $1,000,000.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
What's going on?
Chicken parm sandwich.
Yeah.
Carbs, white carbs.
So you think maybe then I should have more carbs after a training session like that?
I think you should, knowing that especially knowing that you'll probably be training again.
Yeah,
the same night.
All right. So now that's
white carbohydrates, like white potatoes, white rice, or bread.
That's super interesting. So
after your training meal, can be very effective. Or after training meal. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, this is the same kind of thing. In this case, I picked it up on the way home or on the way back to the gym before I got a shower. But normally it'd be like I'd shower and then I go back out. Right. So maybe an hour and a half or so after training.
Yeah, as long as you're within that 90 minutes, I think you'll still get the same effect.
Okay. Now, how do I know what the right volume is? Like is a piece of white like Wonder Bread, is that going to be good, or like a whole potato? How would I know?
Fermentation.
Yeah.
I mean, for some people, it's it's just an apple or a peach or something, because it's sugar, but it's not ideal actually. So, but if there's nothing else, it will still work. But after training, your liver preferentially is looking for glucose, right, to convert to glycogen. Glycogen goes to your muscles, you feel better. Maybe you look better too, right? So uh, white starches are high in glucose.
Mm-hmm.
Fruits are high in fructose. Ultimately, the sugar is sugar. So if that's all that's there, it's going to convert. But it's easier, so to speak. So white rice, a white potato, mashed potatoes, some bread.
It's very counterintuitive. Like physically, I feel fine. Like a little sleepy, but
Yeah.
the last the days that I eat a salad, I'm wiped out. I just don't even want to put my gi on and go back down on the mat. I'm just tired. You know.
Yeah. And so, like, that's the difference, right? The days that I train during the day, I'm teaching at night, but I'm not training again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Wednesday's the only day I do that. So
Yeah.
like I have classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and like I'll roll a little bit, but I'm not really training very hard. Like Tuesday, I don't have another jujitsu class, and then Thursday, I usually train light during the day and then train hard in the afternoon. But that that's fascinating. Thanks for that.
We'll try it.
All right, so how are we doing for time? We're about ready to wrap it up.
Yeah, I think that's a good spot to close it. And next week we will talk more in depth about the strength training and conditioning piece of things.
That sounds great.
All right.